Hey everybody, this is the third video I'm doing in my three-part series about mental health. In this video I'm basically going to be talking about what bipolar disorder is. I'm going to talk a little bit about how bipolar 2 disorder affects me specifically and how I deal with it kind of in my day-to-day life. If you're interested in knowing more about the other two videos in this series, check out their descriptions in this video's description below. So let's start with the basics. What is bipolar disorder? Well, you may recognize it more as what it used to be called, which is manic depression. But some years ago, they changed it over to bipolar disorder. And there's different forms of it. So I think the one most people think of when they hear bipolar disorder is bipolar type 1, or bipolar 1 disorder. People with this tend to suffer more severe manic episodes. Their depressive episodes sometimes are mixed with some of their manic symptoms, and can be more difficult for people to deal with. And with bipolar 2 disorder, people typically have less severe manic episodes. They're classified as hypomania or hypomanic episodes. And then the episodes of depression they have tend to be a little bit longer. There's also another form. It's called cyclothymic disorder or cyclothymia. And basically this is where people have cycles of depressive and hypomanic episodes, but they are less severe than either of the other two types of bipolar disorder. And then even still outside of those three, you sometimes have bipolar symptoms connected to other types of mental illness, but because it doesn't really fit into any of the other categories, it's basically not recognized as a specific type of bipolar disorder. As far as like what causes this, it's not like a trauma-induced type mental illness like you might see in something like PTSD. It has biological connections. Scientists have been able to figure out there are genetic connections that lead to bipolar disorder, but they do know that it's not just, there's not like a bipolar gene. Is multiple genes that kind of work together to cause the disorder to take place. They know that if you have bipolar disorder, you have children, they're at a greater risk of developing bipolar disorder than somebody who doesn't have it. But they also know that it's not a given. There are many times within families where somebody will have bipolar disorder, but several other family members will not. And it will not have any symptoms of bipolar disorder or anything at all. So sometimes it can kind of, for lack of a term, come out of the blue, and can kind of take people off guard if there's been no history of it. So we also know through research, brain scans and things like that, that there are brain structures that are slightly different between people with and without bipolar disorder. We also know that the general brain function of some areas of the brain don't function in the same way as people who have bipolar disorder versus those who don't. But outside that, we're still trying to figure it out. Like, unfortunately, like many mental illnesses, we're still working. Scientists are still trying to figure out exact causes and things like that. So about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And honestly, I've been dealing with it for a lot longer than that. It's just, like I said earlier, it wasn't until, maybe a little over 10 years or so ago that the actual diagnosis for this type of bipolar existed. So I've had periods of time, now looking back, as they say, hindsight's 2020, looking back, I can definitely identify these periods of times where I've had these different types of symptoms and stuff. But earlier on I didn't really know what they were. Now, a few things I want to explain before I get into the symptoms. One, these symptoms aren't all the time. What makes this really difficult to deal with is the fact that it's all random. There's no schedule, there's no indication as to, just because I had a depressive episode here doesn't mean I'm going to have a manic episode. I could have several depressive episodes in a row, so to speak, before I have a hypomanic episode. Or, reverse that. It could be, episodes could be weeks apart, they could be months apart. They can last for a few days, they can last for a couple weeks. It just depends. Different things can kind of trigger them. Stress is a big one, and it doesn't have to be a particular type of stress, just stress can trigger an episode. So that's one of the difficulties in dealing with bipolar 2 disorder for me. There's also, you have basically like your logical side of your brain and your emotional side. And so when I'm having like a depressive episode, I know logically that it will end. I know logically that I'm not worthless or helpless or anything like that. But the emotional side of my brain is basically working overtime and telling me the exact opposite. And not only is it like telling me that, it's screaming it, so to speak. So it's hard to override that emotional aspect that's happening. It's also difficult to understand. So when you try to explain this stuff to people, if they've never experienced depression or mania, it sounds weird, it sounds scary, and can be very confusing. So my effort here is I'm going to try and explain these symptoms in ways that make sense to people who've never experienced them. Now, I do think most people can relate to depressive stuff because everyone's been sad at some point. Depression isn't just being sad, there's more to it, but some of the things within a depressive episode are going to be things that, if you've ever been really sad about something, are going to sound kind of like that. But please keep in mind, this isn't a simple matter of, when I have a depressive state, I just need to be happy. I just need to think happy thoughts. Or when I have a hypomanic episode, I just need to think calming thoughts. Like it's not that simple. So I'm gonna do my best. So we're gonna start with depressive episodes because for me, these tend to be more common and these tend to be longer lasting. Now, typically how I feel when I'm depressed is I'm very unmotivated. And this can be everything from just having difficulty wanting to do work, whatever kind of work, dishes, actual work for school, mow the yard, even things like brush my teeth, take a shower, change my clothes. It just loses all meaning to me, so to speak. I can develop feelings of just being completely helpless, and particularly like feelings of worthlessness. I'm not helpful to anybody. I'm just a burden upon my friends and family and things like that. I sometimes don't feel well physically, so I won't actually be like sick. But you know how you feel after you've gotten over having like a really bad cold, that just run down feeling? That just run down, beat down kind of feel. I typically sleep more, or I'm just really tired and kind of grouchy. The worst part is that my mind, and it doesn't actually necessarily move slowly, but it feels like everything's slower to come to me. It's harder for me to remember things. I can't concentrate on things. So I might be grading a paper, and I'll have over here my answer sheet. I'll look at the answer. Then I look over at the student's paper, and in the time it took me to go from here to here, I have completely forgotten what the answer was. And even though it might be a piece of information that I know, I don't teach math, but just as an example, it's 2 plus 2. I should know 2 plus 2 is 4, but for whatever reason, I just can't recall that information. And it's very upsetting to sit there and just be looking at that and going, I know this, why can't I remember it? Why? And this isn't like forgetfulness like you kind of might have, like, oh man, what was that author? What was that singer? This is just like this clawing, trying to grab that information and not being able to. And it's tough to make decisions. Not only like difficult decisions, but simple decisions like, do I want a glass of white milk or do I want a glass of chocolate milk? And it can just be paralyzing. I can just sit there and stare and just get very frustrated because I really can't come up with which thing I want. I become forgetful. A lot of that's because of the concentration issue and because I'm struggling trying to remember things and stuff like that, so I can be forgetful. I could have a conversation with somebody and I can completely forget the conversation. And then I typically become very frustrated easily. Again, it's because of that, like, I know this, or I know this isn't that big, this isn't a life and death decision. Why can't I make this decision? Why can't I remember this fact? And usually, that can sometimes build up, and then it kind of just, it breaks. And that's usually when I get the most frustrated and the most upset. And that's, if you see me crying, that's typically when I'm crying the most, is because of just that buildup of frustration of like, why aren't things working the way they're supposed to? Why can't I remember these things? And that's usually where it builds up. And as weird as it's to say, even when I'm feeling like my most helpless or worthless or those types of feelings, I'm actually not usually sad. I just don't feel. It's usually after this builds up over, a few days, it finally, that's when the dam breaks. And then that's where a lot of it then kind of gets out, basically. And before I was properly medicated, those episodes would be longer and they'd be more extreme than that. And so if you're kind of like, wow, yeah, without medication, those were worse at times. So now with the hypomanic stuff, it's not like the exact opposite. In some ways it kind of is, but in a lot of ways it's not the exact opposite. And it's not like I go through a depressive state and immediately swing up into a hypomanic. It's might be depressed for a while, then be normal, and then up and then down, so on and so forth. So hypomanic episodes, I typically know when these start because all of a sudden I feel too good. I feel like I'm more special than other people, or I'm more talented, or I'm better. This isn't a simple thought of like confidence. This is literally, I don't know. It's literally like I am just better than you because I have a very special purpose in life and you don't. I couldn't, and it's not like I actually have this thought of like this purpose or anything like that. It's just this feeling of having something that I am better at. And again, I'm trying to explain this and it's really hard, but it is just, I feel great. And there's just you can't touch me with anything. There's nothing that can bring me down. There's nothing that can ruin this feeling. And again, I'm just better than you. This is not a logical thought. It really isn't logical. My mind typically races. So lots of thoughts, lots of just information. It's hard for me sometimes to keep up with those thoughts. So that can be frustrating at times. A lot of times I'll talk too fast. Just, because I'm trying to keep up with what's going through my mind. So I'm just a lot of times I start too many projects at one time. So, I'll start doing like 5 different things because I think I have the time to do it. But, 2 days later, I come out of the episode and it's all like, oh man, what am I going to do? And kind of get stuck with that. I can get frustrated and angry at other people because they aren't thinking as fast as I'm thinking, or at least that perception of that isn't happening. The bagger at the grocery stores bagging the groceries the exact same way they did for the 20 people before me, but because in my mind I've got important things to do, important places to be, all that, they're moving too slow, and so I can get frustrated and angry. I don't usually act I don't act on it. Usually what happens, I get back to the car and I scream and cuss at the steering wheel, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of like I'm in a hurry, but that's typically the act out portion of it. The one nice thing that does happen, not with every hypomanic episode, but with many of them, is I usually get a boost in creativity, which is good for a teacher because sometimes I come up with some really good lessons. And also it's really helpful for the hobbies I'm interested in and stuff to have that. But again, because it's kind of coupled in with starting new projects and things like that, it's not perfect, but it is kind of a nice little boost to have. And as far as anything could be said to be nice with this, it's one of those things. I usually have trouble sleeping. I'm very restless. If I do sleep, it's not great sleep. Like lots of tossing and turning, things like that. I can be irresponsible with my actions, so I can overeat, and I do typically overeat because I'm hungrier. I really want sweets like ice cream, cookies, donuts, things like that. I want more of those types of things. I'll spend a lot on like steaks and things like that. So I can be irresponsible with money at times. Sometimes I'll drink too much if we go out to like a bar or restaurant. And then other times I've said things to people that I normally would never say. And I'm, afterwards, after I kind of come out of that state, it's, my wife or someone will be like, do you know you said this to that person? And I will be super embarrassed, and feel really bad about it. I don't always apologize, because I'm just so overwhelmed with embarrassment that I just don't know where to begin. So there's that. And then I am usually more irritable and respond in ways that aren't appropriate. I've broken a few lamps here and there because they didn't turn on right away for me, and I just lashed out and just broke it. And again, after the fact, I'm usually really embarrassed that I did it, and upset with myself because now I got to buy a new lamp. So that's a lot of what happens with those episodes. Luckily, even when I was untreated, these don't typically last as long for me. I'm not gonna say they've not lasted longer than a week, but most of them have lasted around a week at their longest. Many times it's just a handful of days for these episodes. And finally, I deal with a lot of anxiety. I've always kind of had anxiety, but it's gotten a little worse as I've gotten older. I have a hard time going to public places or like big gatherings of people. I can become a little overwhelmed by all the different noise and distractions and just things that are going on. It tends to frustrate me in ways and makes me irritable. So I sometimes lash out when I don't mean to. One of the ways I can deal with it is, I know sometimes it probably looks very poor on what I'm doing, but if I distance myself from the group, and say like a lot of times what I'll do is I'll play Sudoku on my phone, or I have like a coloring book app, or I just read a book, do something like that. I can kind of help cope with what's going on and kind of help calm myself down. And like I said, it doesn't always look good, particularly if you're at a family event and all of a sudden you just disappear and you're off in a corner and someone sees you on your phone. A lot of times it's perceived as rude. And I'm not going to say that there aren't times where I've not been on my phone ignoring people and being rude, because there definitely have been. But there are some times, particularly if there is a lot of people around and just a lot of noise, that's usually what I'm doing, as I am trying to cope with what's going on. And if you do see me in one of those places doing something like that, you can ask, but please, I need to work through it. I don't need someone sitting there telling me it's okay and stuff. I need to work through it myself. I know what I need to do it. So it's one of those types of things. So yeah. So in order to take care of myself, make sure that I'm healthy and happy and everything, I do a few things. One, I do talk therapy. So about once every 4 weeks, kind of give or take, I meet with a therapist, and it's not so much, complaints or anything like that. A lot of times it's, hey, I felt this way. I was feeling kind of depressed, or I kind of think I was having a bit of a hypomanic episode. And it's, we talk about like what could have triggered it. What would be good coping strategies and things like that. So it's more of just talking out those types of things. Like, I said this really offensive thing to this person. Now I'm too embarrassed to go back and say anything. What should I do? Type of thing. What's the best way to handle this type of stuff? And sometimes I'm sure people probably would think like, well, that's, you just talk to your wife or talk to a friend or talk to someone in your family or whatever. But it's sometimes nice to have a person who's not connected to any of those things to have as a sounding board. And that's really what I do with my talk therapy. I do take medication. I have 3 different types. I have an antidepressant that helps level out the lows. I take an antipsychotic, which anytime you hear the word psychotic, people kind of think it's a bad thing. All it really basically means is it balances out the highs. And then I have an anxiety medication I take. Unfortunately, there's drawbacks to the medications. Weight gain is a big one. I've gained a lot of weight since taking these medications. Even periods of time where I've been more active, where I've been lifting weights, running, doing exercise and watching what I eat, it's hard for me to lose weight. If I'm not exercising and I'm eating poorly, I gain weight very quickly, which stinks because, again, when I do become more active, it's harder to lose. So because it kind of brings down the highs and brings up the lows, it also dampens other emotions. So there's times, where I probably, could be more sad and I'm not, or I could be happier and I'm not. And it's not that I don't feel happiness or don't feel sadness. It's just I don't feel it as deeply as someone else might in that same situation. And then one of the other big ones is they make me drowsy. Now, again, part of that's because I've always had problems with sleep. And so the drowsiness is to help me sleep, but it does create problems. I don't trust myself to drive at night past 9:30 because there are literally times where once 9:30, 10 o'clock hits, I struggle to even just keep my eyes open at all. And so I don't trust that if I'm in a car driving past 9:30, I don't trust that I might not doze off. Now, there are nights where I've definitely stayed up later than 10 o'clock. I've been able to push myself to later, but the later it gets, the harder it is for me to get to sleep. And then the next morning, the harder it is for me to get up because I want to sleep longer because the medication is wanting to force me to sleep longer. So the drowsiness is troublesome and it is kind of a hard thing to work around. The flip side of that is if I forget to take my medication, or I've ran out one time, I don't sleep. I literally cannot sleep, which isn't good because I still get all the downsides of not being able to sleep. I still feel like crap the next day and I still feel tired. I just cannot sleep. So, and that doesn't happen often. It's only happened a few times. And that's, been some pretty extenuating circumstances in those few times. The other thing is this is very expensive. Luckily, I have good insurance. My medications, if I didn't have insurance, my antidepressant, I believe, costs around $400, $500 for every 3 months. The antipsychotic I take would cost around $1,800 a month. And then the anti-anxiety, I think, is like $150 or $200 every 3 months. And if I don't have these, I basically can't really function appropriately. So there are things I have to have. And if I didn't have the insurance, I don't know how I'd get them. Luckily with the insurance, I only pay about $70 every 3 months for all 3 of them. But still, it's $70 every 3 months. Every therapy session costs me about $20 on a copay. I believe it's like $120 total, something around there, if I remember correctly. Again, if I didn't have insurance, where did I get that money? If I lose my insurance, this is considered a pre-existing condition by most insurance companies. My insurance rates would go up a lot. So if I have a job, I need to make sure that that job covers those types of pre-existing conditions and stuff. So, it's a thing that I have to be aware of because of that cost. And then the scariest thing is that the medication could just stop working. No rhyme to reason, no indication, just stop. And last year, we thought this happened. I had a massive episode where for about 4 weeks I was cycling back and forth having a rapid cycling episode where I was going between hypomania and depression very quickly and very drastically. And the fear is that I had a medication that stopped working and that I might have to be hospitalized again until we could figure out a new set of medications to help me. Luckily, with a little bit of tweaking of dosages and changing my anti-anxiety medication, we were able to figure out something that worked. And it took a little time, but it got everything even back out. Since then, I've been feeling pretty good. I still have some depression episodes here and there. Since that year, I've had a couple hypomanic episodes, but things have been probably the best they've really been in a couple years. And again, it was scary because all of a sudden it's just like, I don't know what's happening. We try to, my therapist and I try to work through whether triggers, job related, home related, anything else. Nothing was kind of coming up. And it was a very scary, just how fast it happened, how bad things got, how long it lasted. It was very, very scary and very difficult. And I'm not saying it would have been easier with any other type of job. I don't know, but especially as a teacher, where you kind of are expected to be, for lack of a better term, on stage in front of people, it created a very difficult situation for me when it came to working. But like I said, luckily we got everything worked out, but it definitely really hammered home this idea of like, oh crap, this could just stop. So other things I try to do day to day, or that I try to work on being better at day to day, is I try to keep a journal to track my mood and track other types of things going on. That could be triggers and stuff, so that if I have an episode, I can go back and look and be like, okay, this happened. It kind of makes sense as to why this is happening. I know that exercising regularly helps with the depression and anxiety, and it helps when I have a hypomanic episode to get rid of that extra energy that I have. I was doing better about exercising, and then COVID happened, and now I haven't really exercised at all, so trying to get motivated to get back into that. But that's usually good. I definitely have to be aware of my emotions and interactions with people when I'm in an episode, because sometimes my responses are not appropriate to the interaction. And then, as weird as it might sound, getting plenty of sunlight, it really helps with depression, particularly in the later fall and winter months. That's why I have a sun lamp now. And then the other thing, like any mental illness, maintaining a good support network of friends, family, medical professionals, whoever. Having that support network will make sure that I am able to maintain the health and happiness that I need to succeed. And with all those things, I'm able to accomplish a lot more than I'd be able to without them. So, well, to wrap this up, if you or somebody you know is in an emergency, like where they're contemplating suicide or hurting someone or something along those, please make sure to call 911, or at the very least to call like the suicide hotline number. It's 1-800-273-TALK. If it's not an emergency, reach out to your doctor, your local hospital. I believe even like your local health department would be able to kind of help direct you where to go. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, talk to some other trusted individual, maybe a professor or a teacher, your pastor, or someone like that. As I tell my students, my door is always open. I will help if I can. I obviously have limited resources, but if I can help some way, reach out to me and I will do what I can. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate if you watch these videos. And thank you for your time. So have a good one. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye.